Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. In this podcast, I will talk about the unification movement, which was established by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon and his wife. Um, it is a fascinating movement, one that I entirely disagree with. But then again, most of the religions I have studied, I entirely disagree with. I never attack the religions I have studied. To me, that would be a breach of ethics as a sociologist of religion. I will not do that under any circumstances. I will simply lay out the information, explain it, my own personal views. I may bring them up from time to time, but I will not use my own personal views as a weapon against a religion that I have studied or am in the process of studying. And I am actually in the process of studying a religion right now. Just started studying it about a week ago, come to think of it. It is a fascinating religion. I don't want to mention yet what it is. I will eventually. But until I get a better handle on it and get a sense of who these people are, I don't want to say exactly which religion it is yet, but I will eventually. And eventually is eventually. I don't know what that means. Okay, the unification movement. Um, I studied that movement beginning in 1971 and continued studying it until about maybe 10 years ago. And then I sort of lost interest and moved away and had no contact with anybody who was in the unification movement. But in particular, there was one event which kind of led to my estrangement from them and which made it virtually impossible for me to continue studying them. And I will get to that eventually because I think that is literally the most important thing I have to say. But first, um, the unification movement. It is a very neoconservative movement. They, however, call it heart-centered. To them, they are not conservatives. They are heart-centered. But here's what they do. They talk about everything in light of Cain and Abel. That's right, Cain and Abel in the book of Genesis. And in that story, Cain kills Abel. So to them, the story of Cain killing Abel becomes a paradigm for understanding almost everything that has happened in world history since that time. Does that make any sense? Well, I will leave that up to you to decide. Um, but for example, uh, they see the United States as being Abel, and they saw the former Soviet Union as being Cain, right? Cain killed Abel. So, in other words, they picked everything that they thought was evil and called it Cain. So, in this case, the Soviet Union was evil, the US was good, and the Soviet Union was trying to kill the good United States, I suppose. But they applied that to all sorts of things, almost everything imaginable. Um, I've had almost endless discussions with them, and in particular with a former friend of mine who now will not have anything to do with me, even though we were friends for about 30 years. He knew what I was doing. He was a gay man, and I guess still is a gay man. But he knew I was straight, and he made a pass at me. And I stopped talking with him for about a year. And then, because I was honestly very surprised by it, shocked by it, um, felt like he was treating me inappropriately. Um, but then about a year later, I called him up and I said, Richard, look, um, you know I'm straight, don't you? I mean, I know you're gay, I've known you're gay since I've known you. Uh, and he would not even acknowledge having done what he did. So at that point, he started yelling at me, and that was the end of the friendship. There was no way of recovering it after that, unfortunately. I liked him in a way. He was a kind of odd man in multiple ways. His personality was very, very strange. He actually was married by the Unification Church to a woman, which, if you know anything about that movement, they have these mass weddings or had these mass weddings, sometimes in places like Yankee Stadium, where thousands of people would come together and be married at the same time. So he was one of them. As a gay man, he married a woman. But what did he do? He beat her up mercilessly. Why? I don't know. I didn't think Richard was a violent guy. I mean, I liked him. All I can think of, well, first of all, Richard, like me, is autistic, and he has more problems than that. But autism is one of his major problems. And I think being in that relationship and finding out that he could not really do what was expected of him, namely to have relations with her and give birth to children, which is a big part of getting married in the Unification Church, that he started beating her. And for some reason, she put up with it for a long time. And eventually, she left him. Now, I'm surprised that she didn't press charges against him. I don't understand why. But as I said, Richard is a strange man. I liked him. I still like him. I have absolutely nothing against him. But there was no way, again, for that relationship to continue, given what he did and the fact that he was unwilling to reconcile with me. He was not even willing to acknowledge what he had done. Even today, if he called me up and apologized, I would say, of course, Richard, let's chat. I have nothing against the guy. But again, he has issues, and I don't think he will be calling me. I think that's about the end of it for him, which I feel bad about because I really like him. Um, the guy doesn't have that many friends, but he has some here and there. He has a habit of spending enormous amounts of money on people, and he doesn't have that money. He has no money at all. He is broke. And when he would try to spend money on me, I would refuse. And I would say, Richard, you can't afford this. So he would take like maybe 50 people to a Broadway play. I'm a New Yorker, a native New Yorker, and so was Richard. And then he would pay for everyone, and everyone except for me would refuse. I'm sorry, everyone except for me would accept. I would refuse. That's it. That's it. And I said no, so I would pay for my own ticket. Believe it or not, he was unhappy about that until afterwards when he realized he had no money to pay for the rent, no money to buy food. And at that point, you guessed it, I would give him money to help him get through the rest of the month. So again, it was a very strange friendship, but one that I still miss on some level, which may sound odd, and I realize it probably is odd, but I am an ally. I am a very strong supporter of gay rights and the whole LGBTQIAA spectrum, and I believe in supporting them very, very much, even when it was not popular. When it was not popular to support the rights of gays and lesbians, I supported the rights of gays and lesbians. I was known when I was a professor as being an ally. I was the advisor to the club, it was called the Alternatives Club, but it was the gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, etc. club on campus. And I would go to all their meetings. I supported them. And occasionally, when other faculty would attack them, yeah, we had those. I would defend them. And sometimes I would go to the vice president for academic affairs to report that faculty member, and that faculty member would no longer make those kinds of statements to them. Kind of hard to imagine why somebody would do that. But anyway, Richard was gay in a religion which has very negative views of homosexuality. So, what did Richard do? He went to this guy whose name I won't mention, who was practicing a kind of conversion therapy based on the teachings of Reverend Moon. So it was a unique unificationist or Moonie conversion therapy. Richard would tell me about it. Did it work? No, it didn't work. I mean, conversion therapy itself does not work. I mean, it's like if somebody came to me and said, we want to convert you into a gay man, I would say that's not possible. I'm not attracted to men. I'm only attracted to women. You couldn't do it. You could try, but it wouldn't work. And so I wonder sometimes, because I can only assume that most people who support conversion therapy have done a kind of reflection on that and thought, well, if I were in their position and someone were trying to convert me to being gay, would they be successful? And of course, I think the answer would be no. The way they justify it and the way they explain it is by saying, well, homosexuality is unnatural, whatever that means. And therefore, converting people to being straight should be easy because you're simply making people natural, I guess. Really kind of disgusting. I am happy that conversion therapy is very rarely talked about these days because Richard tore himself to pieces because the conversion therapy did not work on him. I cautioned him in a conversation. I said, Richard, I would suggest you read the studies on conversion therapy first, and you will find out that it doesn't work. I mean, it's not for me to say what you should believe in. If your religion teaches you this, I can understand why you would want to be straight, maybe, although I personally don't understand it from a human perspective, but that's your business. But you are basically headed down the road to a massive disappointment. He ignored me, went into it, and of course, as might be expected, the conversion therapy did not work. I guess that's trying to be heart-centered or neoconservative or something like that. The Unification Church did a lot of good things for me. They once paid for a round trip to Quebec City to attend a unification conference. It was very, very odd, as are most things connected with that movement odd. We were staying at the Chateau de Frontenac, which is right on the St. Lawrence Seaway, a really beautiful hotel from the outside. Once you get in, it is still beautiful. But the rooms, the hotel rooms, they're tiny and they look like they need to be cleaned or painted or something. I mean, I checked under the mattresses for bed bugs. I didn't see those, but it was a really, really big disappointment for me because I was looking forward to staying at the Chateau de Frontenac as a Francophile. I thought that would be a very good place to go, but it was not what I expected it to be. Now, Quebec City in general, I liked, certainly, but The Chateau de Frontenac on the outside is great. The rooms themselves are kind of ugly. And so if you're ever going to Quebec City, I would suggest find some other place to stay. Don't go to the Chateau de Frontenac. Uh, in any event, when we got there to the Chateau de Frontenac, we went to the front desk. There were, I think, about 50 of us. And the person there said, "We have no reservations for you." And the person in charge of the team said, "We made reservations." And I said, "Well, if you made them, we have no record of them." Now, I don't know who made the mistake. It might have been the hotel. It might have been the church. Who knows? Or maybe both. But somehow the hotel fixed it. We were able to stay in the hotel, but originally we were all supposed to stay in one section of the hotel together. Instead, we were spread out all over the hotel. That was fine. Considering how ugly the place was, I didn't care. But it was nice going to Quebec City anyway. I mean, I love Canada. I love Quebec City. I love Montreal. I love Toronto. I love Vancouver. I mean, I love the whole country. I've been all over the country of Canada, and there's no place I've been that I dislike. And I especially liked Quebec City, especially the frog's legs. I never had frog's legs before, and they were very good. And yes, they taste like chicken, in case you're wondering. In any event, heart-centered, heart-centered. Here is the problem, and I'm leaving out a lot, because again, my associations with them went on for several decades. So I'm only going to the finale because I think if I mention every single detail, I will gradually begin losing people, which is fine. I don't care. You want to turn me off? Go ahead and turn me off. But here's the interesting part. I was invited by the local Unification Church in Kansas City to attend a restaurant. They told me they were buying me lunch. And I mean, I've had a long association with that church, and they know that my views are very different than theirs, but they also know that I am respectful of them, which I was. I was always very respectful of them. So I thought, oh, well, that's nice. They're buying lunch for me. Not exactly. Well, I mean, they did buy lunch for me, but there was something else to it. I got to the restaurant, a very nice restaurant in Kansas City, and one that I had actually been to before. And after we sat down, I noticed that there were two people at the table I did not recognize. Yeah. One was a Korean man, about the same age as I was at the time. This was approximately 10, 15 years ago. And the other was a Japanese woman who I think was about 35 or 40, but I'm only guessing on that. And I couldn't figure out, why are these people here? Then I found out. Okay. After we ate, thankfully, after we ate, so at least I got a meal in my stomach. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have waited. So well, anyway, I had a meal in my stomach. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to disgust any of you. To discuss, that's the last thing I want to do. The Korean man came up to me and said, "Look, I would like you to take this Japanese woman to the Oak Park Mall and buy her a meal. Are you willing to do that?" And I said, "Well," "look, I have no problem buying people meals, but why are you asking me to do that?" And he said, well, because we think that she may make a good wife for you. And I kind of grimaced like that. And I said, a good wife for me? I said, nobody told me this over the phone. Nobody told me this. This is a surprise. This is a surprise. Nobody said that I was going here to get a wife. And so at that point, the man said, well, look, she is Japanese and you are a Zionist. And I said, wait. I am a what? He said, you're a Zionist. And I said, what makes you think I'm a Zionist? I'm an anti-Zionist. He looked very, very shocked. Very, very shocked. And he said, well, you are Jewish, aren't you? Obviously, he didn't know that there are a lot of Jews who are anti-Zionists. And I said, well, by ancestry, yes, my ancestry is Jewish, but I don't practice the religion of Judaism. And I certainly do not support Israel. In fact, I would like to see Israel go away and return to the Palestinians, and for the Israelis to leave and go back to the country of their forefathers and leave Palestine alone. They have not been very friendly to the indigenous people of Palestine. This guy looked completely shocked. I have seen people shocked before, but I have never seen someone as shocked as this guy looked when he found out that I was an anti-Zionist. Why? Remember the Cain and Abel thing. Yeah, the Cain and Abel thing. Zionism is Abel. Now, what is Cain? I don't know. I've tried to find that out. It's not the Palestinians. They don't see the Palestinians as Cain, but they do see Zionism as Abel. And therefore, they're Zionists, as you would expect neoconservatives to be, right? I guess. So, yeah, he was not very happy when I said I was an anti-Zionist, but he got himself together and said, I would still like you to take her to the mall and buy her a meal. And I said, well, considering that you kind of mistreated me, meaning you brought me here under false pretenses, you told me I was coming here to get a meal. There was never any mention of a wife. And I said, but what the heck? Sure, I'll take her to the mall and buy her a meal. So I did. Then after that time, we went back, and that was the end of it. That was my last contact with anything connected with the Unification Church. And it was because of that event. That ended it. I did not think it was possible for me to continue studying the unification movement after they mistreated me the way that they did. I can tell you this, I regret not having said one thing. Maybe you can guess what that was, but probably not. It's kind of obscure. I regret, after he called me a Zionist, not saying something like, well, if I'm a Zionist, I guess you are a pimp. Because he was a pimp, in effect. I mean, he was trying to get me to marry this woman. So effectively, he was a pimp. I mean, I guess you could call him, to be nice, a matchmaker. But a matchmaker is somebody who does that with consent. I did not give any consent. So I think that calling him a pimp would have been appropriate. It did not occur to me. Now, if it did occur to me, would I have said that? I don't know. I'm not a nasty guy. I try to be nice to people. So I think that most likely I would not have said that, but I would have wanted to say it. And I thought about it. And ever since that time, whenever I think of that man, I think of him as being a pimp. Does that mean I think of the woman as a prostitute? No. No, I consider her to be a victim. Well, maybe a lot of prostitutes are victims too. I don't know. Regardless, no, I don't think of her as being a prostitute. But him a pimp? Certainly, he was definitely a pimp. So, in any event, although I enjoyed studying the unification movement, I was really upset at their hatred for Marxism, but I kept my mouth shut because to them, Godism, as they call it, Godism, which is their term for the unificationist alternative to Marxism, is able. And Marxism and communism, you guessed it, arcane. Yeah. So it was tough. It was tough. Everywhere you would go for a long time within the Unification headquarters, Unification Church headquarters in New York City, you would see these Godism posters all over the place. And I mean, these people were really, really strong anti-communists. My friend, who's now not my friend Richard, the gay person, he got his bachelor's degree at Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts, and one of his professors when he was there was Herbert Marcuse, who was a part of the Frankfurt School, or the School of Critical Social Theory, and he loved Herbert Marcuse. Richard was a Marxist. So he rejected Marxism for unificationism and Godism. And now I have no contact with that church anymore. I find them to be very entertaining, very amusing, but I'm not going to put up with a church which tries to get me to marry somebody under false pretenses. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.